Hey y'all, hey, it's JJ Conway. Welcome to Building Wealth Together, where our goal is to help you walk in abundance and leave a legacy. It's Mindset Monday, where we take the best teachings on mindset, motivation, and leadership and apply them to your life. This helps you get past the past and grow forward into abundance. Let's get into it. All right. It's time for week 4 of our book study of Zoned In, the mental toughness required for a world-class you. This book is by Dr. Cheryl Klein, and you can find it on Amazon, or you can click the link to buy it on the show notes. Now, before I get into it, this is going to be another one of those weeks where I am not going to have much time to edit before publishing the episode. So if you're watching live, you'll note that there's a lot more ahs and ums than we have when we turn it into a podcast. And if you're listening to the podcast, you're going to hear more of those today, okay? I appreciate your patience with me as we go through this family transition. All right, chapter 4 is about noteworthy focus. So just as a summary, we have talked about different things that we need to be a world-class individual. And one of those is really understanding where we are in our life and what needs to improve. So understanding where our ambitions are and where we want to take our ambition to the next level. We also want to understand that sometimes we can do really well in one area of ambition, such as your profession, but then neglect others, such as relationship or your physical health, right? And so we were challenged in the first lesson to really decide where we need to improve and then come up with an area for improvement. In the second chapter, No Excuses, Cheryl tore down our excuses, y'all. And she showed us how to build a support system around us that will lift us when we're low, challenge us when we need challenging, and then hold us accountable for what we say we want to do and what we say we gonna do. Last week, we looked at objectives. We looked at really dreaming big and smart. So having a really big goal, something that we want to work on over the next 6 months to 4 years, then breaking that down into intermediate goals where we kind of evaluate every 60 days, and then breaking it down even further still into short-term goals, which are items we can accomplish no matter what anybody else does. So whereas the big goals are sometimes things that we can't necessarily control, we can only control how we show up, the short-term goals are the how we show up. And what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about focus, noteworthy focus. Bruce Lee said the successful warrior is the average man with laser-like focus. And that's the thing that I really want to communicate to you all with a lot of these classes. It's not about being the most amazing person. It's not about being the most beautiful or handsome person. It's not even about being the smartest person, the best singer, the best artist. It's about none of those things. It's about being consistent and focused. If you are consistent and focused, you can achieve anything you want to achieve out of life. She opens up this chapter asking us to imagine being an Olympic downhill skier, waiting in the chute for the bullhorn to blow and the gate to open. And in the moment while we're waiting, all of a sudden we think about an injury we had last year, and it distracts us and takes us off of our energy. The horn sounds, and for a moment, we hesitate. We weren't focused, and so then our dream slips through our fingers, even though we were capable and deserved to win. Anyone else have that problem? It seems like right as you're getting ready to give that big presentation, or make the sales pitch, or deliver your content, or finish sewing this item, or measuring this, or preparing that, right in the final stages, your mind wanders back to some past failure, past disappointment, past fill in the blank that someone else imposed on you, like a car accident or an injury. And your mind wanders back to all the hurt and frustration. And so when the big moment comes, you've now allowed these past events to hold you back. Even worse is when these things that hold us back are not necessarily the past events, but they're worries about what could happen in the future. And I'm not saying those worries aren't valid. I was telling the doctor the other day, every time I come to a stop sign, someone's coming up behind me, I feel like I'm about to be hit. Sometimes I feel like I'm about to be hit and there's nobody for miles around. I'm out there on that country road all by myself. It's a natural human response to what happened to me a couple years ago and then getting rear-ended again at another stop last November, okay? Normal, natural human thing. But you weren't called to be normal human. You were called to be somebody extraordinary. Like Les Brown always reminds us, there is greatness in you. There is greatness in you. And the normal human experience has been holding you back for far too long. We got to remember that moments matter. And noteworthy focus is a vital tool that we're going to need in order to accelerate our progress during practice or any other preparation we're doing for what it is we want to achieve out of life. The good news is there are some techniques you can start immediately that will help you retain your focus as well as calm that little voice that likes to rear its head in ways that are most inappropriate for your success. One of those is understanding inappropriate and appropriate cues. So whether we're practicing or competing, we got to gain perspective on what's triggering our behavior during practice and competition so we can accelerate our progress and access what we're capable of. See, we all think a lot of times, now I'm not going to say we all think, but I know that for me, for a lot of my life, I thought I was just an excellent multitasker. I think most women feel like we really are just excellent multitaskers. What a lot of us really are is we are good switchers. We can switch our focus, especially women, we can switch our focus and then get back to what we were doing without missing too much of a beat. That's a great skill. And I'm glad that I can do that, right? But that doesn't mean that we're multitasking. That doesn't mean we're doing 2 or 3 or 4 or 20 things at the same time. And for those of us who think that we're doing 20 things well at the same time, if you examine your results, you might find like I found, yeah, you're doing a whole lot, but you're not doing any of it well, okay? At least I wasn't. And I'm okay with admitting that, right? So one of the things that I had to learn was that I'm just not as good of a multitasker as I thought I was. That's why I always chuckle when I'm talking to somebody and they're reading a letter or they're doing something else and like, go ahead, I can multitask. I'm like, that's okay, I'll wait till you're done because either it's important or it's not. And if it's not important, I don't need to say it. And if it is important, then I want them to hear it, right? So I'm just like, no, just go ahead. It's okay. It's no big deal, right? I found out that only 2% of people are actually effective multitaskers. So if you're one of those 2%, my hat's off to you. But for the rest of us, we've got to learn how to focus not only during game day, not only during the big presentation, not only when we're delivering our Facebook Live, and not only when we're trying to communicate well to our husband or wife, but all the time we practice leading up to those things, right? And I will say, if you don't practice how to communicate to your spouse, you are probably doing like I did for many years, messing it up. Because one of the things I had to learn, this is not in Dr. Cheryl's book, this is a bonus from JJ here. One of the things that I had to learn about my spouse is that we have 2 different communication styles. And I have had to learn how to communicate in the way that he best receives. You know, I used to always think that finding the best possible spouse was all about waiting for the person who was perfectly clicked with me. Well, guess what? I met guys who perfectly clicked with me, but they were not the husband I needed. And so when I found a good one, I said, okay, I got this good man now. Lord, show me how to communicate with him. And so then I started getting into, it was actually, I didn't do it for the marriage's sake, but the marriage benefited. I started doing personality assessments. So I took a job where they trained us in MBTI and then True Colors and Firo B. And then eventually I got DISC through John Maxwell and all these other different things, right? And each one of them, I'm like, oh, wow, that's a different nuance. So I have learned that even though I have a podcast, even though I have a growing YouTube channel, even though I've written 13 books, y'all. I need to hurry up and do number 14 because I don't like that number. I'm not superstitious, but I don't like that number. Even though I've written 13 books, y'all, I still have to practice my communications to my husband because otherwise I come across as very brash and condescending and critical. And I have to think about how it comes across in the way that he needs to hear it, all right? So in all of these areas of our life, it is important for us to practice. And we got to recognize our appropriate and inappropriate cues. In other words, we got to decide which cues are important to focus on and which ones to ignore. See, this is really, really hard in today's world because, you're trying to have a conversation with somebody and then your phone beeps and you just naturally want to look at it, right? Because it's calling for your attention. Or we're talking and something flashes on the screen and you just want to look at the TV, right? That's physical cues. But what about the cues in your mind? Many elite athletes report having very little awareness of their competition, their surroundings, or any of the other things that are outside of their control. When they're in the zone, they are focused on the cues that trigger their next best move, Like if your opponent starts bouncing the tennis ball before a serve, then this cues a highly proficient tennis player to move her feet, get her racket up, right? You can also mentally set some of these cues for yourself. And I liked this example that she gives. Every time you walk into a boardroom, you could touch the door jamb, just like a football player touches the top of the player's tunnel before entering the field, right? It's a cue. It's an appropriate cue to get focused in on what it is you got to do. And to be focused in the energy of the things you can control and to tune out the energy or tune out the visual stimulation, tune out the physical and emotional stimulation of the things you can't control. So if you practice this long enough, you'll notice whenever you enter into the boardroom, you're going to default to touching the door jamb, taking breaths, eye contact, whatever it is that works for you, okay? And when we master these appropriate cues in practice, we become more proficient because we're moving from thinking and doing to just doing. It just happens and it clears mental space. See, a lot of us today, we have so much of our mental space taken up with extraneous things, thoughts, feelings, hurts, frustrations. In fact, that's one of the biggest things that I realized when I began to get my mind right and thinking about who I am and what I am and being happy with myself and pleased with the progress that I've made instead of always looking back and beating myself up. I realized I had a whole lot more mental capacity to do the things that I wanted to do because now I was no longer spending that mental capacity tearing myself down. No longer spending that mental capacity thinking about this or thinking about that or doing this or doing that. You're doing what you need to do. And it frees up your mind to be in the moment, in the flow, and respond more carefully to what's coming down the pike. So you think about like when you were a kid and you first learned to walk, right? You've probably fell down a whole lot, but after a while you can walk without too much thought. Any of you who ever had a car accident where you had to relearn how to use your body parts. I remember having to relearn how to use my left arm. I remember how to relearn how to use my brain. Y'all, talk about embarrassing. My goodness, y'all. I even had to tell my coworkers, and this was hard for a lot of them because they were lower ranking than me. I even had to tell them, look, if I say or do something that's out of sorts, you got to tell me because I'm rebuilding my neural networks and I'm reframing. And sometimes I don't realize that I've committed a faux pas until after I've done it and I see everybody's look. And then my memory says, hey, wait a second, you're not supposed to say stuff like that, right? Or another one that I had was my memory would remember things that happened 2 years ago like it happened yesterday. And so if you didn't tell me it didn't happen yesterday and I told you about it like it happened yesterday, then I would keep on feeling like it happened yesterday. I felt so bad for my son that year because he was late to school so much because in my mind, he still went to school at the time that his elementary school, his lower school did. But now that he was in upper school, they started earlier. And so and then it would have been better for me because I could have gotten to work earlier, right? Like you would think I would have remembered that, but I didn't. So I had to I actually had to tell people, tell me, so that when they would tell me, I could say, oh, that happened 2 years ago. And my memory began to rebuild itself back, right? Okay. I'm not a brain surgeon. I don't know all the stuff. But the thing is, there's things that take effort in the moment now, that if you keep working on it, it's not going to take effort later on. The body is marvelously designed. It constantly wants to heal itself. It continually replenishes. You feed it with good food, you give it good nutrition, it continually replenishes. This is why, and again, I'm not talking about her book right now. I'm still talking about about my experience here. This is why I've realized that if our body's continually rebuilding itself, we have to give it good stuff to rebuild itself with. And I can judge time periods in my life by how my fingernails and my hair and stuff are doing, because I can see where I was taking good care of my nutrition and giving my body the weight-bearing exercise that it needed, okay? And so all of these things come together. And since we're human, we can build in these tactics, these appropriate cues, which then free up our consciousness to be working on whatever else needs to be worked on. And that's a great thing. It's a wonderful thing. Unfortunately for us, because we're human, the opposite works too, right? If we allow inappropriate cues every time we're going to a situation, then those things can disarm our focus. And so instead of the positive cue we said earlier about, the tennis player bounces the ball and not smart, that was the wrong word, a experienced player will move their feet and be ready to receive the serve, right? Maybe the cue might be a negative thought. Oh man, what if I lose this point again? And then you're focusing, and then you lose the focus. You lose the focus on what you've got to do in order to play well. So what we have to do is learn how to look for these inappropriate cues. And I'm going to tell you how you know that they're inappropriate cues, okay? What I'm gleaning from this chapter is something is an inappropriate cue if it's something you have no control over in that moment. So thinking about, well, what if I lose the point again? Well, thinking about that is not going to help you. Paying attention to the ball and moving your feet and getting your racket up, that's going to help you. Okay? And so these are kinds of things that we want to be aware of. And once we're aware of them, then we can take action to minimize their impact on our lives, and we can replace them with positive, appropriate cues that we can control. Okay? The thing is, we're all going to slip up, okay? We're all going to make mistakes. We all miss a shot here or there. We all say the wrong thing at some point. We all take on this business partner or that business partner at the wrong time. Like, we all do something. It may not be the same for you as it is for me, but we all do something. Even senior leaders, even world-class athletes, okay? Even you and me, all right? And so what we have to do is we have to train our brain to be as agile as possible. And I like the way she gives us some techniques to help us develop this style called adaptive thinking, which means that when the inevitable error happens, instead of dwelling on it and beating yourself up about it, you quickly recover your focus on what's most important for your performance right now. Developing adaptive thinking doesn't guarantee you're going to win every time, but it will certainly help you get back on track, finish as strong as possible. So how do we foster this adaptive thinking in our lives, huh? All right, she gives us a couple of things to keep in mind. And you've heard this before. This is not new content, but I'm hoping hearing it from Dr. Cheryl is going to make it more real to you, all right? We got to learn, especially those of you who are like me and you've got this amazing imagination, we have got to learn to separate the empirical facts from our interpretations. Sometimes, I'd say a lot of times, our interpretation driving our behavior is not a bad thing, okay? It's absolutely necessary to saving our life. That's why it's been built in, right? You see an agitated bear while you're hiking, the empirical fact is there's an angry bear on the trail, right? The interpretation is, hey, danger, she's going to eat me for lunch unless I get out of here, right? That's a very, very, very helpful interpretation that can save your life. But how many of us are imposing invalid and imaginary interpretations on ourselves, huh? How many of us are interpreting things in ways that slow our progress and disable us in the moments that matter? We're reacting to a bear when a bear isn't really there. We're reacting to some situation that we think or we interpret is life-threatening, but it's actually not life-threatening. In fact, a lot of times we might interpret one sense of behavior with another. So for example, you're given an interview or a sales pitch, there's key decision makers there. That's an empirical fact, right? Maybe your idea, product, or service is not well received and you might get rejected altogether. Well, that's an interpretation. And a lot of times that's an interpretation configured in our own mind. It's your truth, but it's not the truth because it hasn't even happened yet. Now, anticipating that something like that could happen might lead you to prepare. But in the moment when you're getting ready to deliver it, that is not a helpful consideration. In the moment that you're getting ready to deliver it, you've got to focus on what you can control. You can't control how they interpret you. You can control giving them the best possible material to work with. All right? And so you set that up, and then the next time you have a meeting, now you've got this inappropriate cue lined up in your mind. That important meaning equals failure or rejection. And you might find yourself trying to avoid being even in that situation at all. This can cause a lot of us to enter a downward spiral and create self-fulfilling prophecies. I knew it. I knew it. This is not idea. This is a bad idea. It wasn't well received. They rejected me. But you don't even know why. If it wasn't well received, you don't know why. It may not have been a rejection of you. It may have just been that somebody was having a bad day. It may have been that they had already heard something that more appropriately meets their need and that yours was like the second runner-up. You really don't know. You really don't know unless you ask. And a lot of times we're so caught up in these interpretations, we don't ever go back and ask. Now, just to be clear, she's not saying go back and ask. What she's saying is stop living your life according to these interpretations of things when you don't even know if they're true. All right. And so one thing that I want to close out with before we close out this chapter is how to avoid choking. And there's couple of things that we want to know here. One is we really got to detach ourselves from the outcome. A big portion of why we choke is because we're so wrapped up in whether or not things work the way we want them to work. The reality is there is so much of your success that is wrapped up in what other people are thinking and feeling that has nothing to do with you and that you have absolutely no control over. Okay. And so you've got to learn, and this is something that I have been learning to do, is I spent too much of my career wasting my energy and my time trying to make other people respect me or accept me. And I had to learn, and I'm hoping that you will learn, to let that go. Let that go. The only thing you can control is how you show up. You can control whether you practice. You can control whether you get the rest you need to be on the top of your game. You can control whether you get the sleep you need to be on the top of your game. But you can't control when you walk in that room. You can't control whether everybody immediately writes you off as a woman or as a person of color or as any fill in the blank, as somebody with red hair. I mean, there's a million lame reasons people write other people off, okay? And then you add on to the complexity of what they're dealing with in their own head. Oh man, you can't let yourself get wrapped up around that because there's nothing you can do about that. In order to give yourself the best chance of achieving what you want and deserve, you have got to detach yourself from the outcome so that your mind is not distracted by past mistakes or possible future failures and consequences. It's not that you don't care how things work out. It's that you're going to control what you can control, and you're going to detach yourself from being worried about the things that you can't control. So that's number one. Number two that she gives us is to play outside yourself. And by this, we're talking about looking for who else needs you to show up. Who else is out there that needs you to next level your efforts or your performance? Is a team counting on you? Is your family counting on you? Is your boss counting on you? How about are you counting on you, right? If we can shift and detach ourselves from the outcome and play for someone or something other than ourselves, we can not only avoid choking, but maybe even achieve levels of performance that we didn't know were possible. That's right, y'all. When you begin to play for someone greater than you, oh man, you unlock talent and energy you didn't even know you had. Now, the last thing that we're going to talk about in this chapter for taking charge of what you want is something you have heard from me for years. If you've been following my body of work, and it's called the Reticular Activating System. Ruben Gonzalez, author of The Courage to Succeed, explains that when your RAS is like a computer search engine, right? It only lets through the messages that you perceive as important. So when these messages are given the green light, those thoughts are allowed into the cerebrum. They're converted to conscious thoughts, conscious emotions, or both. And we've talked about this before. Your RAS is the filter. Your brain is taking in millions of pieces of data every day, from the lights to the emotions to the energy waves, the things that we don't even know that our brain is perceiving. Like, it's taking it all in. And what we do is, in order to make sure that we don't go on conscious overload, right? Our RAS filters out only the things that we think are important. So it's like when you go do a search on Walmart.com or Old Navy, right? You're looking for an outfit and you filter out by your size. I don't really want to see all the size 2s and 0s, because if that's all they got in, I've wasted my time. I just want to see the stuff that's large, because that's what I'm at right now, right? And so I click the filter, the large, and the screen shows me everything that's available in the large. Your RAS works the same way. You tell it what to filter in and filter out. And a lot of us, unfortunately, we are filtering in things that are negative and discouraging, and they make us feel bad about ourselves. And then that's all the data we see is data that reinforces that belief. So your RAS seeks information that supports your belief, and it filters the world through the guidelines you give it, which is what you believe. You believe that you're worthless and you're never going to be good enough. That's all it shows you. But on the flip side, if you believe that you have greatness in you, if you believe that you are connected to goodness, you believe that you are connected to the true and living God who created the heaven and the earth and wants you to walk in abundance, and so abundance is your birthright. Oh, if you believe all that, then your RAS filters information that verifies and responds to that. So this is where we have to take things into our own hand. And instead of saying the things that we want and wish for and hope for, we really have to declare it over our lives. Now, Joyce Meyer called it making a confession list. And when I went and did my confession list, I had like 16 pages of scripture that from time to time, I still pull them out and pray them over myself during a prayer session, that I am this and I am that. And I wish now that I'm saying this to you, I would have brought that with me so I could have some examples, because thinking on the fly is not working right now. They're not coming to my mind. But things like saying, okay, I am a high level contributor. Not just I want to contribute at a higher level and be recognized. No, I am a high level contributor and I am recognized and appreciated in my role. Some of you might remember that before I ever became international, I said that I was building an international company to empower women to win with money, right? And it happened faster than I thought it would. When you start to tell your brain what to filter in and out, it begins to respond. You are in charge of this thing and you can make it happen, okay? So you want to make sure that you're not on autopilot. That's how most of us have been using our RAS. We're on autopilot. And the thoughts and things that are rolling around in our head, they're coming in by random or by whatever we happen to watch. This is why they say you watch a bunch of soap operas, your life is going to become a soap opera, right? Because that's what your brain is filtering up, all the drama. Okay? Essentially, our RAS helps us focus on what we tell it to see, which in turn influences our actions. So I would submit to you today, it is time to choose whether you focus on the bad things, the limitations you've been placing on yourself, or the negativity everybody's been trying to dump on you, or instead focus on the possibilities that exist for you. By choosing to consistently focus on the possibilities for your life, on the greatness that is in you, on the talents that you've been gifted, on the calling that God has put on your life. Now you will be able to use your RAS as an ally who influencing how you see the world and attracting to you what you need to succeed. All right, that's all I got for you this week. I'm JJ Conway. Y'all take care and be blessed. Love the podcast? Be sure to like, subscribe, and forward to 3 friends. You can ask a question or take a life-changing class at buildingwealthtogether.com. Now, go walk in abundance and leave a legacy.